Okay, a very warm welcome to everyone that's tuning in today. It's time for the 16th edition of the Triall Community AMA. My name is Raymond van der Waal. I'm Head of Strategic Partnerships at Triall, and I'm joined here today by our CEO, Hadil Esbay, our CTO, Niels Klomp, and our Head of Operations, Joost Vlag. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Thanks for organizing,
Yes,
Ray.
happy.
Hi, everyone.
Happy to be here. Hi, everyone.
So before we start, we'd like to thank all of the community members who took the time to submit questions using our Q&A portal. This edition, the Triall community submitted a record number of over 250 questions for the team. So for today's session, we have made a selection of these pre-submitted questions, and we will also reserve some time for answering questions from the live audience. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Starting with the first question. With the rise of advanced analytics and AI-driven methodologies, how is Triall harnessing the potential of data to uncover novel insights and detect potential signals within clinical trial data? Hadil, would you like to answer that question?
Sure. Well, first of all, definitely very thankful for everyone who has been supporting us over all the past few years and months. And I think the number of record-breaking questions means that Triall still is getting the attention that I feel we deserve, but also that we need. But to dive into this question, so the future of clinical research is heavily data-driven. And of course, we think that informed decision-making based on data is going to continue to play a crucial role. Specifically, we believe in the promise of so-called using historical clinical trial data to inform future research in its planning, design, and also feasibility of clinical trials. Reusing existing clinical data or reusing research data is currently somehow underutilized, meaning that we're not really using the potential of data that's already out there. But we think that using this existing data can really help us to make future clinical trials smarter, faster, and also cheaper. So that's what or where the Clinical Insights Exchange, or abbreviated as CIX, is all about, namely enabling analytics on these so-called historical clinical trial data, but then doing it so in a regulatory compliant and in privacy preserving way. Here, AI can play a big part on the analytics side. And we therefore have also hired Arjan Groen earlier this year. And Arjan is basically heading up the integration and ideation of AI within the Triall proposition. And that's also why we're currently partnering with several external partners that are experts in advanced analytics and AI. Our end goal or our aim is to become a platform that is not only using data and algorithms, but it's also a platform that is really offering a so-called end-to-end solution. So that means that any early stage activities lining up towards managing and operating a clinical trial, all the way to reporting about that clinical trial, and also making sure that data is then ready for future reuse. That's eventually what we would like to achieve.
Thanks, Hadil. I think that was a very clear answer. And for those that are new to the Clinical Insights Exchange or the CIX, I highly recommend watching the teaser video that we published last week. Gives a great summary of the technology and the key product outcomes. So you mentioned the relevance of AI, the relevance of historical clinical trial data. I have a question that goes specifically into AI algorithms, and I think Niels would be great to answer this one. So the question is as follows. AI algorithms play an increasingly significant role in healthcare, from diagnosis to drug discovery. How do you anticipate that tamper-resistant integrity checks for AI algorithms will enhance patient safety, data reliability, and overall clinical outcomes?
Yeah, so there's multiple angles to that question, I guess. First of all, let me start with one of the reasons why we want to have the concept of verifiable credentials together with algorithms on the Clinical Insights Exchange. On one hand, you have, of course, data, and data is not something you can just share with everyone. Of course, around the world, there's different regulations. In Europe, for instance, you have the GDPR, which is, of course, restricting what you can do with data, who's allowed to process the data. And of course, one of the key things of the 6 is that it will allow you to have data on one hand, and then allows you to run algorithms on the other hand on that data. And that also means that the algorithms not necessarily have to be algorithms that the party that is the owner of the data has written themselves. It could also be a external party, of course. And when an external party is providing an algorithm, then you want to make sure, of course, that that algorithm fits your standards, and not only fits your standards, but also fits the regulation. So, for instance, what you probably will want to do is, first of all, have a data protection impact assessment, something which is required according to the GDPR. So, in short, a data protection impact assessment is a assessment which, as the name already implies, looks at the impact on privacy and what risk factors, for instance, are involved in processing personal data. And you can imagine that, for instance, for anything related to clinical trials, you're almost always automatically talking about personal data. And within a DPIA, you will show what measures, for instance, you are taking to prevent and minimize any risk of privacy breaches. And you are required to carry out such an impact assessment. And for instance, you describe what type of personal data you're using, what you will do if a breach occurs, what the potential for breaches are, and the measures you're taking, basically. One of the key things, of course, is that you will want to have, also if other parties are creating algorithms on top of a data set that you are providing, you want to make sure that all those parties have been vetted as well, and that the algorithm has been vetted as well. And this is what we call a concept of labeling. So you can, for a single algorithm, you could require that they need to comply with certain things that you want as a data owner. So whether that be that a data impact assessment needs to be done, whether you require that, for instance, that party has certain certifications. All of these restrictions you can require, and only if a algorithm is meeting those requirements by definition and also by technical measures. Without those restrictions, the 6 would not allow to run the algorithm on top of the data set. That also automatically means that whenever a small change to the algorithm is being made by the third party, it needs to re-provide all the information and the certifications so that the 6 knows, okay, look, this has been vetted. And again, that can be different rules depending on jurisdiction, on what you as a dataset owner require. That means that for certifications, for instance, that could also be external parties that are involved in that certification. So it doesn't necessarily have to be self-certifications by the algorithm provider. No, it could also mean, okay, look, I really need to have it vetted by a third party or even by multiple third parties if there are different requirements, of course. So to sort of recap, I guess, is you can have multiple labels as a data owner that are required for an algorithm, and those labels basically are corresponding with certifications that you require from third parties. And those certifications could either be self-asserted by the third party or could be external certifications. And you define whatever you need, of course. And That in the end, of course, also makes sure that from a risk perspective, both the data owner as well as the party that is providing the algorithms, they are conforming to what is required, and they have taken at least their amount of measures to make sure that everything goes according to regulations, and well, that also, of course, impacts any risks involved in liability, for instance.
Thank you, Niels. And maybe a useful analogy would be to really compare this to, for instance, financial auditing, which we see in the traditional world, where companies' financial books are being audited by a third-party vendor. Or we could also make the comparison to smart contract auditing in the Web3 world. And yeah, using verifiable credentials, we actually can set up a system that's tamper resistant, that really helps establish and promote trust within the Clinical Insights Exchange. So thank you so much for detailing that. I'd like to briefly touch upon two questions that really cover our go-to-market strategy. And I will be happy to answer the first one. So considering the dynamic nature of clinical research, how does Triall plan to iterate and refine the 6 prototype based on the feedback received at Digital Demo Day and Nordic Blockchain Conference? Well, I will take that a bit broader and just focus on customer feedback as a whole. At Triall, we really believe that customer feedback and validation are incredibly important. And that's mostly for 2 reasons. So on one end, it really helps with guiding features and specifications of the future products. But on the other hand, it really also helps with early customer engagement and helping ensure that we have a handful of commercial customers at the time of the launch of the product. Well, for the first commercial version of the Clinical Insights Exchange, we will really focus on 2 or 3 data use cases that offer most value to this selected group of customers. And here you really start with looking at what data is available. So as Adil already briefly touched upon, we're focusing specifically on historical clinical trial data, which can help with planning, design, feasibility. To give you an example there, let's say I'm a cardiologist and I want to start a new clinical trial investigating a new drug. I might want to look at comparable studies that also looked at this indication. And what I can do is I can actually look at similar patients, really dive into their patient profile and the characteristics of that population to better understand how these patients might respond to my medicine under investigation. I can look at comorbidities, I can look at adverse events. All of these data-informed insights I can use to essentially design and plan a better study. So the bottom line is to make my clinical trial more predictable and cost-effective. And at Triall, we strongly believe that this is the future of clinical research. I'm going to jump to the next question. So you shared that 94% of technology vendors list risk aversion as a barrier for implementing new technologies in clinical trials. How does Triall navigate this landscape and foster early partnerships, customer engagement, and experimentation to overcome risk aversion and successfully implement new technologies? Adil.
Yeah, that's a very good question, really, going to the core of where innovators have to deal with. Although there is a lot of scientific progress when it comes to, invention and finding out, how promising a specific new medicine could be for a certain group that is in need of that. You see that the way how we manage clinical trials and how we do the oversight, for instance, and how we do the planning lacks, that kind of innovation often. So what we try to do is indeed try to take this barrier down, because without this barrier, the chances of being able, to embrace new approaches and to also make sure that they are ready for mass adoption is going to be very difficult. The way we do that is we continue to build upon our current industry track record and existing relationships. You can imagine that clients and people that we've worked with for a long time in managing and operating clinical trials, that there are existing relations, trust, but also understanding of their problems, and for them also trust and understanding of what it is that we're trying to establish with Triall. So what we are currently doing, and I think we will be hopefully announcing that in the matter of the upcoming few weeks, at least a very promising pilot setting, is that within our trusted network of collaborators, we are looking at so-called pilot studies, right? So projects where the stakes are lower, but still those studies allow us to demonstrate that our approach is successful. And here we then try to look for win-win scenarios where on one hand, we help our partners with understanding the potential of some of these emerging technologies, but also really line them up for future-proof, clinical operations. And then on our hand, also help us validate our technology. So that's, one of the ways that we've seen we're able to really carve out concrete projects with so-called measurable deliverables.
Thanks, Adil. Let's switch gears for a moment and zoom in on the role and utility of the TRL token in all of this. I have two questions that pertain to TRL's adoption and utility, and I'd like to hand these over to you, Joost. So the first question would be, could you provide insights into how TRL's adoption and usage within the trial ecosystem may evolve over time, particularly in relation to clinical trial data reuse and automated patient reimbursement? Are there any long-term goals or strategies in place to maximize the utility of TRL in these two areas?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ray. And that's another great question. I think we have seen the role of the TRL token already evolve over time, and I'm sure it will evolve further as we introduce new products and features to our platform. So right now, the TRL token is used as an access mechanism, utility token to our software platform. So each time a new client makes use of our software, TRL is purchased from the market. Part of it is locked, part of it is burned, and part of it is added to the liquidity pools. Now, we've also seen more recently the introduction of our Clinical Insights Exchange. And as we roll that out over time and start onboarding data sets and customers and algorithms, the utility of the TRL token will grow along with it. Just as the TRL token plays an integral part in the software platform that we currently have, it will be an integral part of the Clinical Insights Exchange. So when you want to transfer data from one party to another, one has to pay with the TRL token or its TCRED counterpart. And the same goes for algorithms running on top of the data that need to be purchased with the TRL token. So you can really say that the TRL token will be the native exchange token of the Clinical Insights Exchange. Now, the exact token economic model underlying that is yet to be fully published, but will follow the same token economic principles that we uphold in our current software platform. And I think the same can be said with future products that may not have yet been ideated or are yet to be developed still. We'll make sure to keep the TRL token as an integral part of any future products that we may release.
Thanks, Joost. And for those interested in learning more about those core tokenomic principles, I can highly recommend the article on Medium, which outlines the principles. So I'm going to go to the next question. Automated patient reimbursement is an intriguing concept in the context of clinical trials. How does Triall envision the integration of TRL in automating patient reimbursement processes, and what potential advantages does this offer to both patients and clinical trial sponsors?
It's an interesting question. Right now, the TRL token is not really used to reimburse patients within a clinical study, because that's typically something that is done by the local hospital staff. So when a patient or a participant in a clinical study goes to a local hospital, gets his new treatment, performs some tests, fills out some questionnaires, then at the end of the day, they get paid by the local hospital staff, or at the end of the study, they get paid by the local hospital staff. So that's not really something we are interfering with. It's not a system we're looking to replace within the scope of a clinical study. But when you look beyond the scope of a clinical study, that's where the TRL token and our platform really comes into play. Because now the participant has completed the study, and through our self-sovereign identity wallets, we're able to give that patient ownership of their data, which they could subsequently leverage as part of the clinical insights exchange. Now, if other researchers want to make use of that data, they will have to pay for that using a TRL token, and a fractional proportion of that will go to the respective patient that made his or her data available. So we are reimbursing patients, but we're not doing that within the scope of a single clinical study, but rather beyond the scope of a study with the reuse of data over time. And that ultimately may form some sort of passive income, if you will, for participants that have collected data in a clinical study and make that available on the Insights Exchange.
Thanks,
and for, yeah.
I think it's a very powerful concept. And I think it also provides a great bridge to the next topic. And in that case, I'm really relating to involving patients beyond a clinical study. I think in the current model, patients are often completely left in the dark. What happens with their data after a study is completed. And here, TRL can make a difference, data ownership can make a difference. But another very important topic here is the topic of dynamic consent. Well, for those that have looked at our socials, we recently published a preprint together with Mayo Clinic physician Dr. McLeod on blockchain-based dynamic consent. So we have selected 2 questions that cover this topic, and I'll be happy to answer the first one, which is: blockchain-based dynamic consent has the potential to revolutionize the way patients interact with and control their health data. Could you explain the core principles and mechanisms that underpin this concept as explored in the research paper, and how it empowers patients in the context of health data sharing? Well, in order to do that, we should first cover the traditional and current way of working, which is a one-off consent moment. So at the beginning of a trial, a patient signs the informed consent form. And as part of that informed consent form, the patient signs off for participating in a study and making their data available for the study and any other related future research. Well, like I already mentioned, this means that quite often, in almost all cases, patients are completely left in the dark around what happens with their data after a study is completed. And we think this is a missed opportunity, because the reality is that this industry still struggles to recruit and retain patients for the full length of a study, and actually empowering them and giving them more ownership and control about what happens with their data could be a most welcome opportunity to tackle this issue. And this really brings us to the topic of dynamic consent. So why is this called dynamic consent? Well, it is dynamic in the sense that it allows patients to provide, update, and also revoke their consent permissions over time. And we think that is especially relevant if you consider giving patients ownership over their data after study. So after a study, they get ownership and control over their individual data, not the aggregated clinical study data, but their individual data. And they have the option to share that with other entities and initiatives. Could be a nonprofit, could be another clinical study. And here they can use dynamic consent to provide and update access permissions over time. And blockchain really plays an important part here. when it comes to ensuring that this is done in a privacy preserving and tamper resistant way. And this is really where blockchain comes into play, where sovereign identity plays its role. And for those that have really done a deep dive on the Clinical Insights Exchange, we're also going to implement something called compute the data, which is a form of privacy preserving analytics. Jumping to the next question. So beyond the publication of this preprint, what are the next steps and objectives for Triall in advancing the field of blockchain-based dynamic consent in patient-centric health data sharing and research? Are these upcoming phases or projects related to the research that the community can anticipate? Well, for those that know more about our collaboration with Mayo Clinic, or those that don't, Adil, maybe you could give a brief summary of how we started collaborating with them and how we view our collaboration going forward, also focusing on the dynamic consent topic.
Thanks so much, Ray. Happy to do so. So we started our collaboration with Mayo Clinic in September last year. And we know relationships, but also working towards specific projects always take time. We're very happy, to mention, although I think the community is aware of that the Mayo Clinic is currently using Triall's blockchain enhanced e-clinical platform in a multi-center study. And as soon as the study is concluded, we'll be able to discuss the results where it relates to Triall's involvement, of course. We've also, since the start of our collaboration, been part of the Mayo Clinic Innovation Exchange, which has been very useful to us. Namely, it's a platform that connects external parties like us with Mayo Clinic departments. I think just responding on what you said regarding the recent research paper that we had with Dr. Chris McLeod from the Mayo Clinic, that's really a next logical step for both organizations to further explore the promises of blockchain and SSI technology, especially as it relates to dynamic consent, as you mentioned. And just to summarize our so-called academic output, because we believe in order to stimulate innovation, education is needed. So our academic output really offers multiple benefits. It allows us to identify optimal approaches, so approaches that are tested in practice to implementing and studying these technologies. But also, equally important, I would say, it demonstrates our thought leadership position within the Mayo Clinic, but also outside. So I think we've been getting very nice and very good responses, regards to this pre-publication, and we are very much looking forward to doing the next, or to moving into the next phase together with Mayo.
Thanks, Adil. So I have two more questions left from the selection of pre-submitted questions. One really relates to marketing and business development, and the last question relates to our token liquidity. So I'm going to answer the first one, which goes as follows. Panel discussions at major events like the Nordic Blockchain Conference often delve into critical industry topics. Can you provide insights into the specific theme or subject of the panel that Triall co-founder Ray will be speaking on? What expertise and perspectives does he bring to this discussion? Yeah, so 3 weeks ago, I participated in a panel at Nordic Blockchain Conference, which focused specifically on real-world applications of blockchain-based technologies in healthcare and clinical research. So I had the pleasure of sharing the stage with 3 other forward-thinking companies, talking about our own experience and covering key challenges, lessons learned, and a future outlook for blockchain-based technologies within clinical research. Some of the topics that we covered, on one end was really the importance of focusing on product outcomes. So what is the mission critical problem you're trying to solve, and how is blockchain uniquely positioned to tackle some of the underlying suboptimalities? Unfortunately, many companies in the blockchain and Web3 space are still approaching this backwards, starting at the technology. I think we all know the sentence, technology being in search of a problem. And well, that eventually brings you into issues. as in the end, you are talking to life science professionals. Not all of them, certainly a lot of them are not very versed into blockchain, Web3, self-sovereign identity. So it's up to us to really be clear and educate the market on what are the product outcomes being derived out of these technologies. And again, that's also why research paper like the one we are doing on dynamic consent can really help. It can really help with explaining the relevance of this technology, and it can really help with introducing these new ways of working. Another topic that we covered extensively is really being aware of quality and compliance requirements. And this is an interesting one because if you look at regulatory requirements, most of these are really technology agnostic. So they don't tell you what technology you need to use, but rather give you a list of the requirements that your technology should adhere to and the processes that you should follow. And this, I think, really opens up opportunities for emerging technologies because we can actually demonstrate that we can adhere to these requirements. And we can also point towards relevant industry guidance and documents to show that we are, well, first of all, aware of quality and compliance requirements, and second of all, can ensure a clinical trial that fully adheres and is compliant to these requirements. I'm gonna go to the last question, and I think it will be the last question of today. There is a lack of liquidity on the DEX and SEX for the TRL token, the decentralized and centralized exchanges. And as a result, the trading volume is very low, which implies that the slightest movement to buy or sell makes either the price increase or drop quite significantly. What is Triall's team planning to, or how is Triall's team planning to overcome this problem? Joost.
Yeah, well, we aim to increase liquidity on our markets as we grow the platform. As interest and uptake of our software grows, the liquidity of our markets will grow along with it as per our token economic principles. So for each new study, each new client, part of the revenue is burned, locked, and added to the liquidity pool. So if we grow the platform and new usage comes in over time, the liquidity pools will grow along with it. And well, we spoke about the introduction of the Clinical Insights Exchange. These same principles will be adopted when we roll out the Clinical Insights Exchange. So with more traction there, liquidity of our markets is expected to grow along with it. Right now, we are focusing primarily on creating good markets on centralized exchanges. So I think with our most recent centralized exchange listing, there's good opportunity to buy and sell your TRL tokens. If you post limit orders on these exchanges, I'm sure they will get filled quickly enough. And that's where we are focusing the majority of our liquidity on right now.
Thanks, Joost. So that has brought us to the end of this live video AMA on YouTube. I hope that you have all enjoyed the session, and I'd like to thank our guests today for the insightful discussion. So thanks again, and wishing you all a nice day. We will be back probably by the end of October, beginning of November with another session. So if we did not have the opportunity to answer your question, please try again or share your question in the Telegram community, and then we'll make sure to answer it next time. Thank you.